All right, so welcome to today's practice on the 21st of the 2nd, that is the 21st of February. So as I was setting out today's practice, I sort of thought that it was going to be such an interesting approach to looking at the structure of the tools and how the tools work. And as I said in the introduction that precedes this video, I am planning on looking at how the PAScribe tool coordinate system, which teaches vertical pitch of the pen staff, just sort of grab that. So it teaches the vertical pitch of the pen staff, it teaches the horizontal tilt, and it looks at the axial roll. So it helps us to position in a sort of XY, in a sort of Cartesian system, an XYZ coordinate of where the point of that nib is, but also where the reservoir is in relation to the point of the nib as it is touching the surface. I put a few nibs out to look at for a number of reasons. And I thought that even though this is one of the daily practice sessions in the subscription community, the PAScribe community, that this information is really, really, really important. And that's why I'm sort of sharing it with you. You'll see me sort of looking across because the other screen that I'm filming on is there as well. So I'm filming this on Zoom, but there is also another type of recording, which is a much higher resolution. And if you want to see that recording, it's best to go to the community. I'll leave a link in the comments, in the notes below. So let's get started. And you'll also see that I'm stopping a little bit between the recording. So the Zoom recording, which is over there. So you see me pointing over there, not looking here. The Zoom recording is a continuous recording, and the other recordings are split up because the file sizes are much bigger, because the camera angles and the sections need to be smaller. They need to be in 12 sections. Okay, so let's get started. All right, so I have my little recording sheet, which tells me what I'm doing. And of course, I've done the recording, which is great, the welcome. Now we're going to look at the prep and the pre-writing. So normally in the daily practice sessions, I would go through it. They're all laid out in the same way. So I'm going to look at the previous practice, and we'll look at why this previous practice has instigated this practice today, because it really pushed me to see some issues I was having with my writing, and it allowed me to think a little bit more about the writing implement and how that works within the context of the script. So let's look at the last daily practice. Okay. So if we look at the last daily practice, you can see that I am in the last daily practice. I started off with pencil exercises. And once I did those pencil exercises, I immediately started to aim for the halfway mark. Now, I use a 1-to-1 ratio when I'm doing Copperplate script, which is baseline, X height, cap height. And the cap height for me is the same as the ascender height, and obviously the descender height. I know some people use 1-to-3, but I prefer to use 1-to-1, especially when you're teaching, because it's easier to get that ratio working better. I was happy once I started to write a little bit lighter. Then I moved to the nib and I started to test the nib a little bit. And sort of here I found that I knew the nib wasn't clean enough. So I had cleaned the nib here, and once I cleaned it, it was a lot finer. So let's see if I can zoom in a little bit more there. So you can see that these hairlines are a little bit thinner. I mean, marginally thinner than here. They are a lot thinner in real life. The next thing I was looking at is with the B, the R, and the P, because this is the group I'm currently working on. Where is that weight? So obviously these are done with a pencil. This was just to get a sense of the writing. I talked about the line of universal beauty curl versus the line of universal, the curve, sorry, versus the line of universal beauty curl. And I was sort of questioning myself about what I had in my manual on Copperplate script and why it worked that way. Here we looked at where this little ball is, and we can see that there is this sort of relationship. This is why I say the B, the R, and the P, rather than putting them in alphabetical order, which would be the B, the P, and the R. Right. Next, I did it quite large just to look at the structure of the letter. And of course, I was looking at where the line of universal beauty curve could stop and found that that actually influenced how the line of universal beauty interacts with the baseline, whether or not it goes underneath. The next thing I looked at was what is going on here. So I decided to stick with the B. We have a tight loop, let's sort of zoom in there, a tight loop, a slightly more open loop. You can see this is quite tight. There's space inside there. This is a cusp, so there's no loop. It's a sharp 1 and 2. This was a break where I did 1 and lifted and came back. And then I put the angular confinement system that I developed for my Copperplate script manual in to help me understand what's going on with the weight. And then from there, I decided, once I started writing these again, that something was going on, and I decided to add more axial roll to the pen staff. And here I changed from rolling to actually, I turned the page quite a lot so that the nib was facing the direction of the 55. So this threw up quite a lot of information. And in the end, I decided to test the B again, then to test the B, the R, and the P, and then to do the letters that we've done thus far, the A, M, V, W, and N. Remember, the N is in a slightly different group to these. Then the H and the K and the I and the J and the T and the F. Right. So I discussed that in the previous daily practice, which lives in the community. And this caused an absolute mountain of questions for me. So I've sort of been thinking about this quite a lot, and how these questions need to be answered, and what I would need to do in order to tackle these answers, in order to produce these answers from the questions. So so there's a lot that's been going on. You know, obviously we've done A, M, V, W, N, H, K, I, J, T, and F. But the problem is, I'm now sort of questioning a lot about the tool and where that nib sits in relation to the writing of the letter. Right, so let's here. Of course, the funny thing about this is you're getting the full recording, and the other recording that lives in the community does not have the bits in between that I'm recording. So you see me sort of talking to myself. Let's put this here. This. That. Now, with the tools and materials, so let's just go through the tools and materials I'm going to use today. So of course, with the tools and materials, I talked about this in the practice. I thought I'd gotten this off. I'll deal with that later. I have a little box, and in that box, I keep all the tools that I use for the practice, so that so that I can find them more easily. I have a Derwent 5B pencil, Staedtler HB pencil, and Pentel 0.3 pencil. And I usually use the Copper Noir, or I use a Monteverdi ink. I'm currently using the Copper Noir ink, and you can see I have a little ashtray, and that ashtray holds the ink in place, so that it doesn't get knocked over. Now, for today's practice, I'm working on Color Plan, which is a paper that I've been working on for a long time. I have a copy of my alphabet in the groups in front of me, which I don't really need today because I am still working on the B. And I have an old piece of a t-shirt, which is very old because I use it for ink. But with today's practice, I have a variety of nibs. So we have a 122B nib here, a Gillot 303. I have two Gillot 303s, a 156, and a 303 in an oblique holder. So this is a handcrafted oblique holder. This is not, you know, just sort of bog standard plastic oblique holder. So we'll see why I've decided to pull these tools out to have a little bit more of a detailed look at them. Okay, so let's get started with some basic warm-up practice. Now, I always start with testing with the pencil. The aim is to get light, to start light rather than starting heavy. So inhale on the upstroke, exhale on the downstroke. All right, so I'm happy with that. I'm happy that I'm sort of ready to move on very quickly. So it's the 21st of the 2nd, 2023. Just writing the date up there. So I'm happy with that. So I'm going to get started with the ink. And I've been using a 303. So I'm going to go back to that 303. And of course, what I'm planning to do is right. What I'm planning to do is this. So you can see that the page is at a very different angle to the edge because the camera is tilted at the angle of the page, you think that it's straight on. The reason I'm showing you this is I'm going to add a lift using this ruler. You can sort of see all my tools set out. And that means putting it about, let's turn it over, putting it about there so that you can see how it springs here. Where's the detail? There we go. Other way. Yeah. So you can see how much space there is under here. Do you see how that tapers down? So that tells me if I write here, there's a little bit of bounce where the paper will interact with the nib in a very, very different way. So let's do some lines of universal beauty and connective strokes. Of course, the problem is with the nib, the angle changes. So let's show you that angle. So you'll see it's gone from here to there. Now it's not an arbitrary angle. You do have to find this yourself. Leave 2 spaces because, so let's go back to that. And let's turn that. Okay, so let's get started. Inhale, check. Inhale, exhale, inhale. Nope. So I can feel the nib needs to be cleaned. Notice I started, and whenever I stopped, it's because I didn't feel the stroke was good enough. I didn't feel that it was in the right place, and there's no point in continuing it. That's why I moved along. So I wanted to get to the point where I'm actually writing. I think I pressed too hard on that nib because I feel the tines have bent a little bit. So let's have a look at this. What's going on here? Yeah, so in wiping the ink off, I've distorted the tine just a little bit. Let's put this aside. Let's grab another 303. Pull this towards me. Oh, infinitely better. Okay, right, so I'm fine with that. Let's make some notes. Let's skip 4 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4. Mark off, mark off. Check to see how much ink there is. So this is a 303. And I am so what I'm doing here is I'm sketching the angle the nib is at. So that is about 55 degrees HT 55 degrees. No, sorry. VP 55 degrees, HT 15 degrees. And AR is 10 degrees. Yeah. Okay. So that's the vertical pitch, the horizontal tilt, and the axial roll. Now, I know this is a little bit technical, but I'll get back to it in a second. So this is a 122B. And already you can see that the hairlines are thicker. So the pitch is the same. So, oh, sorry, that's a 56. It's a 56. So this is a 22B now. Okay, so that's all right. And now I'm going to use 303. Oblique holder. Okay. Okay, so what I've done there is I've looked at the 303 and I've worked out what my vertical pitch is, my horizontal tilt is, my axial roll is. I've used the same, roughly the same coordinates for the 56, the 22B, and I haven't recorded them for the 303 in the oblique holder because it's a slightly different approach. These three coordinates sit differently in an oblique holder, obviously because the nib is tilted at an angle already. So what am I looking for? I'm looking for deposition of shade. So already the 303 in the oblique holder tells me that I don't really want to use an oblique holder for this script because that difference, let's zoom in on those. That difference from a shade to a hairline, from a hairline to a shade to hairline is too much. And I personally don't like my script to look like that. I much prefer lighter, more delicate sort of script. The 22B is nice because there is more transition from, let's look at the first one, more transition from the hairline into the shade, back into the hairline. I don't like how this sprung open, but it was the second stroke, so that's fine. So these two tell me that this nib will do the kind of letters that I like. Now, of course, this is 6 mil. I'm pointing because my cursor is on the screen. So the lines are 6 mil, and actually, you know what? Let me just go for that. So that's the second stroke. You can see these two lines. This height is 6 mil, so this is a 12 mil height. I'm not sure if I like the thickness of the hairline in this 12 mil height, so that's something else to think about. And then, of course, the 56 is nice, but the problem with the 56 is, for me, the shade and the hairline's too thick. The 56 might work better at 18 mil rather than 12, because you see how wide this springs open, and look at the thickness of the shade. No, that's the first 303. Or rather, it's the second 303 because I just threw away the first one. That gives me a nice hairline and a nice shade, but this requires a lot of control. So I like this tilt that I'm using here, but of course, let's see what's going to happen when I start really focusing on the roll versus leaving it on, trying to keep it closer to the 55-degree angle without too much of a horizontal tilt or an axial roll. Right, what's next? Okay, so it's funny, normally during the class, those who attend the daily practice see me sort of chatting to myself, trying to figure out what I'm doing next, and they never see all of it. Well, they see it. But those who can't make the class and attend the recordings, they don't see all of this. What they see is, they just see me going from video to video. They don't see the crazy bits in between, which you are seeing, because I'm doing a full recording of the session via Zoom. So what am I going to do? Right. I think let's write some letters. Let's concentrate on the B based on the previous practice, and then look at what caused you to start thinking about this so carefully. So 1, 2, 3, 4, skip 4 lines. Right, let's try it bigger first. So I'm going to look at the B based on the previous practice, and I'm going to investigate what happened last week, Thursday, and why this precipitated this need to investigate the shapes and the aspect of the tool. Okay. So, just to feel I'm a little bit too far away. Now, as you notice, I move a lot. I move the chair, I move the page, I turn things. I'm very aware that staying in a static position is not the best approach to writing. So, you know, if you pin your page down to the desk, you're going to run into problems. Okay, let's get started. So I'm going to write a little bit bigger, add the lift in as well, because the page just feels so fixed to the desk. I don't really like that. Excellent. try that again with a little bit more tilt and roll. And let's do it again and feel what's happening. And let's lean back. Okay, so I want to stay on that 55. The camera's too far away from me. I want to stay on that 55 now. So I'm getting my hand into a comfortable position. So now what I want you to pay attention to is look at this, right? That's the 55. Notice this is the 55 here. This is not at 55. The tool is not at 55. So let's turn the page. So I've just lifted my hand a little bit. So the tool is at 55, which means I need to move back a little bit. Let's turn that so you're not sort of freaking out at the angle a little bit. Let's do that again. Right. Lovely. Okay, so let's go down in size. Okay. So I sort of went through some different rotations to check what's happening, to see where the tool sits in relation to the baseline and how that affects the shape of letters. Now, I initially, so turn this back. Because of course, when you're talking about something, you need it to be at a comfortable angle to see it. So let's look at this, right? So I decided to start off at 18 mil because it gave me more space to produce the stroke, and I needed to see what was happening with the tool in that space. I tested the shape a little bit using the same coordinates. Then I tested it with a little bit more roll, the same amount of roll, and then tilting the page and the tool so that it was at 55 degrees. That's when I sort of turned the page quite a lot more. I tested them again, and then I decided to go down to 12 mil because I felt my hand was starting to hurt at this height. Now, 18 mil is a big height to do something like Copperplate because there's a lot of interaction with the tool and the nib and the paper and your hand, and you really have to be quite careful. So, of course, it was such a steep angle and I wasn't really prepared for it. So let's look at it here. So I'm looking at it on the screen rather than on the page. And we can see that the line of universal beauty here, for the most part, is on the 55, but it doesn't feel like it's on 55. So if we put that through the bulk of the letter, we can see, actually bizarre. Oh, yeah, it's on the other side. There. If we put that through the bulk of the letter, so you can see that that is the bulk of the letter, not this, not the weight that you're seeing. The weight that you're seeing is on the 55, but the bulk of the line of universal beauty, which is there, is not on the 55. So that's the 55 there. So that tells me that turning the page too much causes an instability on the angle at which the line of universal beauty will sit. Now, I don't need to put the ruler there because I can immediately see that this is really far off. That's the 55 there. And that is there. So this flattened the angle even more. So once I saw that, I was careful. And in my mind, I thought, try and stay on that 55. And you can see me getting better at staying on the 55 for this set. Now, issues? What are the issues? I feel that turning the page too much makes the letter much wider than I would normally make it. So if we go back to last week's practice, we can see that this is what I would normally do. So that's quite a narrow letter when you compare it to, when you compare it to these letters. So these are much wider. And I don't know if they're wider, if they're just wider, or if they look wider because they're leaning off that 55, and these are on the 55. But then look at the line of universal beauty curl. It's much bigger and swooping, and this is sort of tighter. So other issues to consider. Problems with where the deposition is, what's happening with the deposition. And you can see when you get to tilting the page too much, the deposition sits lower down. Now, is that because of the nib, or is that because of where the page is angled? Because it doesn't happen here as much as it happens up here. So maybe it's something to do with this. So quite a lot more to think about. So I can take these. short-sighted glasses up. Right, where are we at? Stop there. Okay, so the next class is on Thursday, the 23rd of February. And that's an all-member session, so anybody can join that class, which is going to be quite interesting. We already have quite a few people who have RSVP'd. If you're not in the community and you want to join the class, follow the link below and join us. There is an all-members class once a month, and the daily practice sessions, which are usually Tuesdays and Thursdays, they are run for the subscribers via the subscription part of the community, and the recordings live in the subscription part of the community. Right, so I will see you guys on Thursday with lots of other people. And I will obviously start going through these letters again, really sort of focusing on the issues that I've been having with the tilt of the tool. So thank you very much for joining me today. A little bit confusing, a little bit sort of frustrating. I'm still trying to figure out what's happening here. I'm not sure if moving from 18 to 12 is something that is advisable, or maybe you can't write at 18, and my PAScribe tool hold allows me to write at 18 quite easily, but maybe in trying to figure out what's happening on the page, maybe writing big is not such a good idea. Maybe 18 is not the optimum height for this kind of exploration. Maybe 15 is. And 3 millimeters could make a difference here. I'll have to test that. I'm still quite confused about what's going on with the tool hold and the tool coordinate system. I don't know if I'm sort of nitpicking but like I said, this is my practice. I've opened up how I practice and the explorations into my practice so that you can join in and see how I work. And this is the kind of detail that I focus on when I'm practicing for myself, because then when it comes to teaching you, you don't have to worry about these problems, because I've done all of this exploration to help you not have to go through this. I think there's a lot more that needs to happen here. And what I might end up doing is continuing through the alphabet. And once I finish the majuscules in a couple of weeks, really sort of come back and look at this in a little bit more detail. My only issue with leaving it a little bit later is because letters like the L and the Z and the Q and even the T and the F, which I've already looked at, those letters, they might need a little bit of understanding of what's happening when we move from 55 to a horizontal line to create that base horizontal waved stroke. So there's a lot to consider here. Do you need to consider it? I don't know, but like I said, this is my practice, which I've opened up so that you can see how I practice. So I hope that's helped in some small measure.